If you ache for truth, goodness, and beauty, if you're hungry for a Christianity with substance and strength, if you long for a faith that's big and bold and biblical and all about Jesus Christ, if you're inspired by the idea of one church that has spanned 20 centuries, 24 time zones, and 2 hemispheres, enfolding every race, nation, and language, then you're considering Catholicism. Welcome back to the podcast. This is truly an exciting afternoon because I am once again out at the secret compound, but this time I'm out here with the one, the only, the inimitable.
That's fair, I guess.
You are inimitable. The inimitable Ed the Protestant.
Ed the Protestant. And you know what makes this special is that there's nothing special about this afternoon.
What I'm trying to figure out how to do with my voice, but I don't know how to do this, is add the little TM symbol after Ed the Protestant.
Oh, yeah.
Like trademark.
Yeah.
Like you are the one, the only, the inimitable Ed the Protestant TM.
Trademark. You've included that in texts.
Yes.
Yeah, you've trademarked.
I figured out how to do that, and I copy pasted.
And I learned from you. If my wife says, "Didn't you wear that shirt the last 2 days?" I always say, "I'm branding myself."
Exactly. You're creating a brand.
Right.
That's right. And when I can see when you pulled up here in the white Jeep into the woods. And you got out, and it was like, hola, Eduardo, I don't know, El Protestanto, or whatever. Here, behold, and you come out and you have your costume, your branded costume.
Right, so we're working up to a whole line of merchandise here, I think.
That's right. Ed the Protestant Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
Cool sunglasses.
Yeah. That's
right. Shoes without laces.
Right. What's the definition of fashion? I am fashion. If I wear it, it's fashionable.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kick off a new series here on the podcast. And it's a series about why people don't go to church. What keeps people out of the church?
I love it.
And over the next number of episodes, we're going to talk about what keeps people out of church in general, both Catholic and Protestant.
Yep.
But in particular, what keeps people out of the Catholic Church.
Sure.
And we're going to talk about different reasons that people give.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's a difference between the reasons they give, which are sometimes excuses, and the real reasons, which is sometimes they won't admit, or maybe they don't even really understand themselves. They tell themselves it's because of A when it really is deep down B, and maybe they don't even have that level of self-awareness or honesty with themselves.
Right.
So we're going to get into all that. We're going to talk about all the different reasons, and then we're going to do an episode on each of those reasons and say, okay, if this is what's keeping them out of the church, then how do you overcome that? Like, how do you talk to somebody? How do you come alongside them? How do you persuade them? How do you evangelize them?
Yeah. When I was a kid in the Baptist church, we were always being told to go out and evangelize people. But I just always felt the pressure to be clever or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I was approached by a Catholic magazine to we'll see if it happens, but they want to know if I would be curious about writing a series of articles about evangelization,
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought about it and I wrote them back and I said, I would, but I don't want it to be the same kind of articles that you read all the time, because I feel like so often when we talk about evangelization in the church, the articles are almost predictable, because it'll be like if we made the church cooler or more friendly or more open. And this was what I wrote back to the editors. I said, I'd love to do this series. But the thing is that I don't think there's any one reason why people stay away from the church, leave the church or stay away from it. And so if you're going to do articles about evangelization and they're all just, different ways to attack the problem, but there is no one problem.
Yeah.
And what I said is it's a little bit more, like medicine. So if you went into the doctor and said, "Doctor, I'm sick," and he goes, "if you're sick, here's
take 2 of these.
Take here's the sick pills.
Right.
And you go, don't you want to know what kind of sickness I have? Like what my symptoms are? Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Sick people need this.
Right.
And you go, that's crazy, right? There's 10,000 different ways you can be sick, or 10,000 different reasons you're sick. So what a doctor is going to do is a good doctor is going to diagnose what's wrong with you and prescribe a solution or a treatment or medicine or something that addresses that diagnosis.
Right.
We should treat this more like medicine evangelization. We should be saying, my friend Bob left the church or doesn't go to church, and so I need to understand why Bob, what's his issue? And then in my evangelization efforts, I have to address that particular issue, which is different than Susie, who has a completely different reason why she left the church or stays away from it. And the thing that will work for Bob and bring him back maybe won't work for Susie.
Right.
So it just feels, I've been around this for 35, 40 years, the evangelization world, and it always seems like somebody's pushing their one solution, like they're, sick pills, or here's my evangelization solution.
Yep.
And if the churches want to evangelize, they'll all do this. And I don't even think it's just that different churches should do different things. I think that every church should do different things for different people. And I think that every one of us has to look at the people around us in our lives and say, why does what keeps this person away? What keeps this person away? What keeps this person away? And our evangelization efforts have to be obviously, scaled or tailored or targeted or something to that. Okay, so I had my friend Ed, who was a Protestant, and he, wasn't Catholic. And so we started talking about Catholicism.
Right.
And here we are, 2.5 years later, still talking about Catholicism. And he's still not a Catholic yet. So I'm not sure how well it's worked. But the point is that with Ed, it was having conversations at the taco shop or out here at the fire pit talking about evangelization. But I have other people in my life who don't even listen to this podcast, and I don't even try to send it to them because that's not their thing. They're not going to be talked into the church.
Right. Yeah. You hit me where I was thinking about it. You hit me at a logical entry point, because I had all these theological questions, and
both of us came out of that seeker church thing from the late 90s or mid 90s in evangelicalism, which again had one diagnosis. The reason that people don't go to church is it needs to be contemporary, and and if only the music sounded like the music they hear on the radio, they would come to church. If only there were cool videos or skits on stage that were like the movies they see. Right. In fact, if we showed clips from Hollywood movies as sermon illustrations, then that would bring them in, or whatever.
And it never occurred to me while we were doing that maybe people could just stay home and watch a movie and listen to music.
Yeah, and maybe that worked for a few people and some people, but there were a lot of people who that wasn't the reason they weren't going. And I see this today in the Catholic Church all the time, which is, especially you'll get if the priest were more friendly, then the reason people aren't coming to church is the priest needs to stand out the front and greet everybody by name and backslap them and say hi to them. And I'm sure there's people who go, oh, if I would go to church, but the reason I don't go to church is when I go there, the priest doesn't, give me a bear hug. And there's other people who goes, I would never go to a church where the priest gave me a bear hug. That would actually make me turn around, get in the car and leave, because I don't want that. So again, my point being that everybody's got a different reason why they're not there.
Yep.
And so the solution to try and get them back is going to be identifying those particular things and trying to reach them at the level or from the angle or, whatever that their issue is. The medicine has to match the diagnosis. So all that being said, here we are burning time on the episode, but this is the introduction to the series. And it'll be, a half dozen or more episodes, and we're going to take on a different particular issue in each of them. But in this first one, let's just talk in general. And you had some thoughts about the kinds of things that we've seen in our lives over the years, and we still see today in the lives of people around us, that keep them, that either have driven them away from the church, or maybe driven away isn't even the right word. They've just dropped off.
Yeah.
Or keeps them from coming back, or keeps them from coming for the first time, or whatever.
Here in our neck of the woods, which is oh so Protestant, people have that thing where, we've all been trying. In the 80s, the Secret Church movement started, Willow Creek and then Saddleback, and they were doing all those things that to get people in. And everybody in our town, this is going back to the early 90s, was trying to do those things. And so now that's been going on here. And what's happened is, what I see is it's turned people into consumers. Oh, I have a choice. What kind of music? There was a guy, I was sitting in the coffee shop with some guys, and these old guys in the coffee shop, and I used to come down there sometimes and hang out with them. And a guy came that I didn't recognize, and they said, "Oh, Ed, this is so-and-so, so-and-so, this is Ed." And he was kind of a button-down, patches on the jacket sleeves kind of guy. And he said, and there was a priest who sat there, and he started laughing, and he said, "Oh, Ed, you need to tell him what you do for a living." And I said, "I'm the music director at this big church in town." He said, "Oh, you're in charge of the happy slappy stuff." And I said, "Yeah, if you don't like it, then you can blame me because I'm in charge of that." And it turned out that he was losing members left and right from his church coming to our church. And he just was dead set against doing it for that reason. And I found out later that he hired one of my old interns to come and make the happy slappy at his church. It's just everywhere. So you can't, we can talk about why people don't go to Protestant churches, but that's kind of just one thing. And then why people don't go to Catholic churches, maybe that's a different thing. In our neck of the woods, I think people don't see any difference. They don't not go to the Protestant church or not go to the Catholic church for different reasons. Some of them just don't go to church because they've burned out on it, or they've decided that I don't like the music at this church because there's too many guitars, and I don't like the music over here because it's too much like an orchestra. And the Catholic church is just a piano and an organ. I don't like that either, so I'm not going to go because I don't like the music.
Yeah, I mean, one of the episodes that we'll do in this series is about irreligiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm saying that right. People have become irreligious, so that would be irreligiosity or secularism. They've just become irreligious. They just don't think religion is important.
It's a good way to put it,
and it just doesn't register. They don't see it as important in life. And we'll do a whole episode in this series about that, because I think that's a huge issue. So that keeps people away from not just the Catholic Church, it just keeps people away from churches in general. And then, like you say, there are some people that leave the Catholic Church for various Protestant or non-Catholic churches for various reasons. Although I would say, we used to have a lot of those when I was an evangelical, former Catholics coming.
Yep.
This. I certainly can't, I don't have any data on this. I don't have any percentages. Right. Freely labeling this as total anecdotal, off the top of Greg's head impression. But when I look back at it over the years, I'd say that a lot of those people that left Catholic churches and wandered into the secret churches that we worked at were just on their way out of church in general. Like they started at the Catholic Church, and then they sort of wandered into evangelical, happy clappy, whatever secret churches. And then that was a waypoint.
Right.
And now they don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I would be willing to kind of bet a box of donuts that a lot of those people, when COVID came and the churches shut down, just stopped going altogether and have never gone back. And I think that for some of them, it was a rationalization. I grew up going to church. I grew up going to the Catholic Church, and that was baked into me, and I didn't like it, and I wanted out. But my conscience or my social networks or my family network, I had to go somewhere.
Right.
And so I went to the secret church with the band and the videos and the this and the that, where I could kind of sit in the theater seat and have a Starbucks. And that was a way for me to have not fallen out of church totally, right? It was sort of a comfortable waypoint.
Yeah.
And then that was just, and then they've burned out.
Well, instead of saying, instead of not wanting to hear how you need to change your life or repent or not sin or confess your sin and all these things, you can go sit at a seeker-friendly church where they don't ask that of you. And pretty soon you get the idea that what I do doesn't really matter. And then pretty soon, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, all of these things we'll dive down on. I want to circle back to something you said a minute ago about consumerism.
Yeah.
But I remind me, because
Okay.
before this episode is over, I want to come back to this thing that you and I were talking about before we started the recorder about the gospel.
Yeah.
And how hard it is to share the gospel.
Yeah.
To modern contemporary Americans
Yeah.
today. But back to the consumerism thing, I don't know how exactly you said it, but it gets framed sometimes as the seeker movement or evangelicalism made people consumers. And I'm not so sure that it was that. I think that our culture and our civilization made them consumers.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different reasons we can get
Right,
into
sure.
how that happened. But then the seeker movement and the evangelical world in many cases is a condescension to their consumerism.
Okay.
In other words, churches started to realize the Willow Creeks and these kinds of
Yep.
places started to realize in the 70s or 80s that, oh my gosh, Americans are consumerist, they've become consumeristic or whatever, right? Their whole worldview is consumerism. And by that, I mean that everything's about them, and then they just they consume things. They
Right.
pick and choose things up to and including, who they mate with, right?
Sure.
I mean, tell me what these, I was going to say mating apps, but
That's not bad. Yeah.
mating apps, dating apps, mating apps, or whatever are, other than this sort of consumeristic approach to saying,
Sure.
like here's a supermarket, Tinder or whatever,
Right,
I can
yeah.
flip through, swipe,
Yeah.
however I've never
Yeah,
done
yeah.
that, but
Yeah,
whatever they do, how they can swipe through and just sort of it's like looking on Amazon for somebody to mate with or something, right? And up to and everything in our lives is approached that way because the consumer is king. It's about me. It's about what I want to do. It's about finding the look, the style, the feel, the taste, the whatever in food, clothes, cars, vacation spots, homes, people I have mate with or whatever. And church. I want to find the church that fits me,
Yeah.
suits me, right? Just like I look on Amazon for the shirt. I ordered a shirt this morning off Amazon.
Oh.
And so I'm very excited for the Amazon.
Wear it next time
truckers.
so I can ridicule it.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see what showed up. But I was sitting there actually, flipping through Amazon at different, my different options
Right.
for shirts.
Yep.
And there were so many different options for shirts. And
Right.
then I kind of zeroed in on one where I kind of liked the look and the style and the price. But then it came in 32 different colors. So
Yeah.
I was flipping back and forth. And I actually asked my wife, which do you like I've narrowed the 32 colors down to
Right.
3, and which one?
Right.
And, okay. And we, I'm kind of I'm curious to see what shows up in the package.
Right. Will it actually look like the picture?
Yeah, whatever. But the point is, but that's it then, right? So then I go, we'll see if it actually meets my expectation. But we do that with everything because that's how we're coded and how we're programmed in our society to
Yeah.
be consumers. And then what happened was the seeker church, recognizing that, said, let's use that. Let's lean into it.
Yeah.
If that's how people are going to think, then let's present church that way. Let's present your options, your colors, your styles, your this, till you can find the thing that suits you. And that was, a complete inversion, obviously, of the gospel in a lot of ways, which is that God exists to suit you, for you to consume, rather than for you to to adjust yourself.
Well, how do we
come to
invite
an unchangeable God?
in the seeker model church? Here we are inviting people in by saying we will cater to your preferences. How then do we tell them, okay, now that we've done that, you have to stop doing these things and start doing these other things? That we repredicated this on you doing whatever it feels good to you.
Okay, so I don't want this turn this episode into a whole episode about the Seeker Church in Willow Creek, although that would be we could do a whole episode on that.
Right.
Maybe you should sometime. But what's interesting is that I don't think there's anybody who thinks that the seeker model of the 80s and the 90s is still a thing. In fact, I don't think Willow Creek thinks it. I think it was a number of years ago, Hybels himself wrote, who was the founder of Willow Creek and all that, wrote it was a book or something. We used to work with Hybels as an author when I was at Zondervan. I can't remember if it was a book or he wrote some piece where he said, basically, after the 30 years of doing it, it didn't work.
Yeah, I read that. I read that blurb too.
It didn't work. And what it was is that the idea was it was like a funnel, like the salesman's funnel, right? Sales funnel. You have all these prospects at the front end and you move them through the sales process and then they come out the narrow end, committed customers or whatever, sold. And he said, we filled the big rooms with people with all of the razzmatazz. And then the idea was we'd start you there. This was always the argument. I know this seems shallow. I know this. I remember going to the Willow Creek Pastors Conferences and Hybels and stuff going, I know this all looks sort of superficial and shallow and kind of stupid.
Right.
But, we start people with this, the shallow, superficial, stupid stuff. And over time, they'll just kind of move through the funnel and they'll come out the other end fully. Remember their phrase, fully committed disciples of Jesus Christ. And the thing was that they never got there. Most of them never went past that because I remember Hybels saying this in that final piece that he wrote. He said, because the problem was that when you finally came to him and said, hey, I know you've been coming for the Starbucks coffee and the bagels and the entertainment and the feel-good, preaching messages. You didn't call it preaching. You just call it the feel-good messages.
Right.
But now we want to convert that. We want to transition you off that into the hardcore Christianity stuff where you take up your cross and follow Jesus.
Right.
And people are like, I was here. And this is going to be one of the episodes that we're going to do, right? But now we could go off on this whole thing. But it's like in the Gospels, when Jesus fed the 5,000. Right? He had the loaves and fishes and multiplied them for 5,000 people. Everyone's, hey, I was here for the free food. Then in the Gospels, right after that, Jesus starts saying all these hard things. Like in John 6, he starts talking about, the Eucharist and eat my body and blood and then follow me and take up your cross and be willing to suffer death and persecution. And people are like, not so much. Yeah. I was here for the free lunch.
Right.
You had me with the free lunch. But when it was take up your cross and suffer for the gospel, suffer for Jesus, they just all dropped out.
Yeah.
Which is what happened after Jesus fed the 5,000. They all wandered away. So that's kind of a debrief on that seeker thing. But I just want to talk about that consumerism. And I think we'll do an episode on consumerism and how that plays in, I'm going to say the American model, but I think it's the Western European and increasingly East Asian. When you talk about Japan and parts of China and South Korea, whatever, it's sort of this kind of Western world thing or, modern world thing of consumerism and how that affects evangelization. But let's move on to some other things. You had some other thoughts, I think, as well about the kinds of things that keep people out of the church.
It's nobody likes being challenged about their lives, right? Yeah. You very famously, at least for me, said, you don't change God to fit you, you change yourself to fit God. And all that you just said, and you and I were probably at some of the same conferences. It's true. It affected my life for 30 years. I bought into that. Another thing that's happening is I think that churches are not, except for Catholic churches, they're no longer structured around or talking about their belief systems. It's devolved into who's the best speaker and who's the best preacher. And that was I'm so glad that I'm embracing Catholicism because I'm so glad that I can let go of all of that anxiety,
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is a real important shift, and I think this will be one of the episodes in this series, and that is how doctrine or the substance of beliefs plays into that. One of the reasons why people drop out of church or don't go to church is that they don't like what the church teaches. In some cases, it's they don't like what they think the church teaches. Okay. Right? And there's this Chesterton quote about most people don't really object to what the Catholic Church teaches. They object to what they think it teaches because they don't understand it. But I would say also, too, that there's something that happened in the last 50, 60 years in some aspects of the church and some kinds of personalities that in church leadership that say people don't like doctrine and it shouldn't be intellectual. And, the church should be kind of, substanceless, if that's a word, right?
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't talk about doctrines and it shouldn't be intellectual things. And and there's some Catholics who are like completely embarrassed by the Catholic Church's history of all this doctrine and philosophy and theology. And that's not what people want. And what I want to say clearly, make sure everybody hears me, is the whole point of this series is to say that there's different strokes for different folks, right? So there are some people that like the intellectual, as I said earlier, the intellectual conversation about belief and doctrine is just not going to work for them. But I think what happened was when you make the church substanceless, it doesn't really believe in anything. It's just all praxis.
Yep.
So it's, what's your church all about? We sing these songs.
Right.
And, then you come down and you get communion. You come down and get the white thing.
Right.
What is the white thing? It's kind of like a symbol of Jesus or something, or but it's the thing that we do. You come in and you kneel here and you stand here and you sing these songs, and then you come down and you get the little white wafer thing, and then you go and you sing some more songs, and then you go shake the priest's hand and you go to donuts in the hall. That's what church is.
Right.
And or it's that, and then it's whatever other activities or social justice stuff it is, or whatever you give to these causes. Now, again, I want to be really clear. The whole point of this series is that there's no one reason why people don't go, and the intellectual doctrine thing is a problem for some people, and it's the solution for them is to address those issues.
Yeah.
For others, not so much. But I do think that when you took all of the substance out of some churches or maybe some preachers or pastors or priests, they're preaching, and it just became without belief or doctrine or any intellectual framework, you lost a lot of people. Not everybody, like I said, not everybody, but you lost a lot of people, because if there's no there, why am I here?
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is always, I think, the thing that has struck me is that in a lot of the church's evangelization efforts, not only Catholic churches, but Protestant churches, evangelical churches, by removing all of the doctrine, teaching, belief, I mean, obviously there's more to substance than just that. There's, not just believing, there's doing. But when you took out all of that stuff, then you go, then why am I wasting Sunday morning here?
Right.
It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
If it makes no real difference, if it doesn't mean anything, if it isn't really about anything, then why, for a lot of people, why would I go? And what they've done is they've simply swapped that out for believing in other things. They started believing in various secular ideologies and mythologies and things like that, And so they're super attached to political causes. For a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people in the last 40, 50 years left the church and replaced it with politics.
Sure.
Whether you're on the right or the left and you're watching MSNBC or Fox News, those have become now, they fill the space that churches used to fill in terms of giving you things to believe in, to occupy your brain, to make you causes to be committed to, things to argue about, they give you a belief system. Because you can't live without a belief system. And when they stopped getting it from the church, a lot of people, and that's why our civilization, our culture is so toxic and our politics are so toxic, because people have invested our politics with the part of their souls and their brains that used to be given to religion. And now they've just transferred all of that intellectual energy to arguing about politics.
You said one time, and I struggle with this. You said one time that the greatest, how did you put it? The greatest disappointment in life or whatever was to not be a saint.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had said that. I can't remember who it was. But there's a famous quote.
Somebody,
there's a famous quote that they said that the greatest tragedy
Tragedy.
that can occur to a soul is to have never become a saint.
And I've always, in fits and starts, I've always sort of felt that way. I was with an old friend the other night, and he said, "So you're doing this whole Catholic thing now?" He said, "What about all those years you spent in the charismatic church? What about that?" I said, I guess I feel a little dumb about some of it, but I was looking.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking, and I'm still looking. Yeah. I think there isn't anything. If you don't do that, nothing else has any meaning.
So in this series, over the next number of episodes, in the next few weeks, we're going to talk about, again, back to the medical metaphor, some of the main reasons, diagnose some of the big things that have caused people to drop out of the church or keep people away from it. Things like doctrinal issues, belief systems, things like hurt and pain. Okay? There's a lot of people that stopped going to church because they had a bad experience.
Yeah.
And again, this is why I don't think evangelization is just one thing. There's one thing you do. Because there are going to be some people who go, no, my problem was never the belief system of the church or the teaching of the church. My problem was I had bad experiences. Or my problem was that the leadership of the church didn't live up to its own belief systems. Or I was abused. Or I saw things that turned me off. So bad experiences. Another thing is opportunity. A lot of churches haven't made it as easy to join them and be a part of them as maybe it used to. And I would say that a lot of churches go to extraordinary lengths to supposedly make it easy. But the reality is that if you turn back the clock 50 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, the community that you lived in, the family systems you lived in, the peer pressure, the social networks that you lived in made it very easy for you to be in church on Sunday because everybody was, right? If your extended family go, mom, dad are there, brothers and sisters are there, grandma and grandpa are there, the kids are there, the neighbors are all getting in the car, up and down the driveways on the block or walking out to walk down to the corner church. And so how hard was it to go? I don't know. You just follow everybody else who's going, right? In fact, it was hard not to be there.
There's nothing else to do on a Sunday morning.
Well, there's nothing else to do, or it was sort of hard not to be. You paid a social price if you weren't there.
Yeah.
Why didn't Ed go to church? Right? Mom, dad, brothers, sisters, grandpa, everybody, neighbors, friends, coworkers. So the social pressure, the social networks, the social systems, the culture was all there. And I think when that eroded for a variety of reasons, it was like the dominoes or something. Once it picked up momentum and there was less and less social expectation or pressure in the culture to go, then it became harder and harder and harder to go. Yeah. Because now you were going against the grain, against the current, against the flow. And nobody was, and so if you said to your family, let's go to church this Sunday, everyone's like, we've got other plans for the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. We'll get into that in one of these episodes. The consumerism thing. Another one that we're going to talk about, and I think we'll talk about this in the next episode, is what the church has traditionally called attachments. Mm-hmm. And these are the things that you are attached to in life, the things that you love more than you love God.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be talking about in the next episode. But I want to end this episode. I said I wanted to make sure we came back to this because you and I were talking before we started the recorder about how we were trained or taught when we were younger to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And how hard that is to do today. So why don't you pick that up?
What it boils down to is telling people that they need the gospel. And that's a hard thing to tell somebody. Who are you to tell me that I'm a bad person, that I need Jesus, right? The Baptist church, one time when I was a kid in youth group, they sent us out. My church was in a bigger city near here, and they sent us out on a Saturday morning to go witnessing is what they called it. And I was walking along with this girl that I had a crush on, and we just walked around and talked. Here comes a guy, no one dared to say anything, And now I'm changing my views about how do I talk to somebody and evangelize them in a world where nobody ever thinks they do anything wrong? How do I get there first? I'm not sure.
So we use this word gospel, which is the etymological history of it. It is the the Greek word in the New Testament is evangelon, and that's where we get evangelism, right? And in Greek, that means good news.
Yeah.
And in Middle English, like the earlier forms of the Middle Ages, which was heavily influenced by German, Saxon, whatever, evangelon, or whatever from Greek got rendered as gospel, which was good news, right? Because there's good news in Greek and gospel somehow in Middle English, and then gospel devolves to gospel.
Right.
So the word gospel just means good news, which is what it means in Greek, right, in the New Testament. But good news assumes that your current default state or the status quo is bad.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you have huge amounts of credit card debt or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I can't pay my bills this month. And I go, hey, I just went out to the mailbox and I have some good news. We just won the Publishers Clearinghouse, whatever. Or, I stopped by to get gas and I got a lottery ticket and I scratched it. I don't know how that works. I've never actually bought a lottery ticket in my life. But apparently, you scratch something and it's, hey, look, guess what? I have some good news. We just won enough money to pay off all those bills.
Right.
For something to be good news, the backdrop has to be some kind of bad situation, right? And then it's a solution to your problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that the gospel, the good news in the New Testament was framed is that the bad news, I'm going to give you the bad news first, then the good news. The bad news is that you are alienated from God and under his judgment, and you're going to die and face an eternity in hell.
Right.
And there had to be an awareness of that. And when the apostles, when Jesus was preaching, when the apostles were preaching, they were like, hey, we all stand under the judgment of God, right? This is St. Paul, Book of Romans, right? We all stand under the judgment of God because of sin.
Right.
And the wages of sin will be death. But Jesus says, good news.
Right.
I've come that you would have eternal life.
Right.
Right? So in order for the gospel to be perceived as good news,
right. Yes.
The person hearing it has to have self-awareness that they are living in sin and alienation from God and stand under his judgment. And when they face death, they will face, death and alienation from God. But if you don't believe any of those things,
right?
I don't believe I'm alienated from God. I think God's pretty happy with me just the way I am.
Right.
If there is a God,
right?
But I kind of believe in a God, but I believe in a God who loves me exactly as I am.
Right.
And everything that I'm doing. And God isn't unhappy with me. He doesn't judge me. Jesus doesn't judge anybody. God isn't going to judge me. He's happy with me as I am. And so I don't need to change anything. And when I die, I'm going to go to the light and I'm going to get to this kind of happy place where all of my former pets will be. And it'll all be good. So when you come to me and say, hey, I want to tell you the gospel that you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and you need to take up your cross and follow him. And so becoming like him in his death, you can win eternal life.
Right.
They go, that doesn't have any persuasive power.
There's no bearing
today.
on my life.
There's no persuasive power today.
Yep.
And we used to call this pre-evangelization in the sense that in order to reach people with the gospel, there's conversations that you have to set it up. People have to have some level of, which is why, by the way, and this episode's getting like crazy long, which is why, by the way, I used to say that so often evangelization works well with people who have had substance abuse, alcoholism and substance abuse.
Yeah.
For the number of people who reached a place of brokenness in their life where they had to say, I am a sinful person.
Right.
I've done bad things. I don't like the way I am.
I can't deny it.
And I have a consciousness of my sin and my guilt. And I am aware that there is a higher power. And I'm aware that I need to turn things around so that this is not me for eternity. And that's why so many people that I have met in life or in my ministry who really embrace the gospel, a lot of them have come out of, substance abuse and this and that, because that gave them that consciousness, that awareness that then made the gospel, good news.
Yeah.
So I think to the degree that our society tells people that there's nothing wrong with them and that there is no such thing as sin, and God, whatever he is, the one thing he doesn't do is judge anybody for anything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're just going to go off to be with your pets, in
Right.
some happy place forever when you die. Go over the rainbow bridge, cross the rainbow bridge
Yeah.
where your pets are waiting.
Yeah.
Church has no appeal to them.
Right.
Because what is it offering that they need?
Nothing.
So I'm sure we'll explore that. But I think that's a big issue today, what keeps a lot of people
Sure.
away from the church. So anyway, okay, so this is the intro, the kind of rambling mess of
Right.
an intro, but we're going to try to tighten this up. And in the episodes in this series, we're going to take these things on one by one.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And so rate and review the podcast as always. Send us your emails or messages. ConsideringCatholicism.com is the website. You can post messages there, or you can send an email to consideringcatholicism@gmail.com. Love to hear your questions, your stories, your comments. Please, again, rate and review the podcast. Helps us immensely. And would you support the podcast with a one-time or recurring financial gift that makes it possible for us to do this? So
Right.
thanks so much. And we will be back with the next installment of this series in a few days.